Tears will not save our children. Reform will. Peace and greetings to you all. I'm Dominique. This is Gender F-Word Chats, where I discuss what's happening in this perpetually absurd society. Here we are again after another tragedy has unfolded in this perpetually absurd society. Here we are seeing politicians rush to Twitter to give half-hearted condolences to victims of this terrorist attack. When will Americans finally stand up against the gun lobby? When more lives are lost? Is the plan to desensitize us to this violence so that we are fearing going outside? Texas politicians say that the solution to gun violence is more guns. This is like throwing salt on wounds of the families that suffered the loss of their loved ones. According to officials, 18-year-old Salvador Rolando Ramos is the person who police believe acted as a lone shooter in the incident at Robb Elementary School. There are officials in Texas that instead of sympathizing and having receptive ears to the families of the victims, they are saying how this was the fault of the current law enforcement failing to have adequate resources. They are calling for armed teachers and the further militarization of police officers in school districts across Texas. How can students actually really be safe when every adult could potentially carry a firearm? There are studies that even show that adding more policing to schools hinders the learning experience, but how could we expect current politicians to care about that, because the United States still has a very underfunded public education system that is completely ignored? What I see here is what could potentially be a slippery slope, and I'm going to get further into that right now. I see more guns being placed into schools where the majority of students are Black and brown. I see teachers in classrooms using panic defenses when students of color step out of line. I see SWAT teams being called on minority students for sketchy behavior when they could be doing something simply as reaching into a bag. This may not happen today or tomorrow, but when has increasing police ever benefited the country overall? Look at previous administrations if you cannot see the correlation. Senator Ted Cruz responded to this tragedy by saying, inevitably, when there's a murder of this kind, you see politicians try to politicize it. You see Democrats and a lot of folks in the media whose immediate solution is to try to restrict the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens. That doesn't work. It's not effective. It doesn't prevent crime. I actually abhor that human lives are in the realms of political discourse. Politics have become the new religion, leading people to throw away morals to stay on the good side of their party. This is despicable, but we allow this. We Americans sit around and let old white men dictate our lives, down to the right to safety, while listening to them preach about constitutional rights that have never been taken at face value since its conception. The talk about taking rights is just coded language that scares middle Americans, quite frankly, into blind support of the laws that oppress them. More policing and more militarization of public schools will do nothing but create a pendulum effect that targets the most marginalized. Allowing police to brutalize students for the sake of preventing another terrorist attack is not the solution. Gun reform, and this goes beyond political party, is needed. We as a country need to really sit down with ourselves and really think about our morals and how that is tied to politics for some reason. Human lives mean more than who you vote for, in my opinion. The pandemic has highlighted a very damaged and corrupt country. Our sense of security as a nation was removed seemingly from beneath our feet, seemingly overnight. Loneliness and alienation is one feeling millions felt all over the world in the years that the pandemic ensued. Now being slowly indoctrinated back into normal life, then we are seeing the infected wounds of our country's psyche manifest in the violence that's happening. The subway shooter, the Texas shooter, and other domestic shooters have one commonality that needs to be addressed too. If we really want to tackle why mass shooters exist in the first place. They're all men. Not only men, but they're usually men who are so far removed from society that the only way they feel seen is to wreak havoc on others. Prior to the incident that happened in the New York City subways, the shooter was online spewing hateful rhetoric that was fed to him through incel echo chambers. And if you don't know what that is, look that up. It's very dangerous. The Texas shooter had an argument with his grandmother before killing her in rage and then proceeding to inflict more violence. Resources actually need to be allocated and started going to mental health resources instead of more guns. We also need to, as a society, destigmatize men seeking mental health resources. What both parties are not addressing is that mental health resources are still not up to par compared to other developed nations. Instead of simply taking away guns, which will not work at preventing violence, neither will giving everyone guns, which will not work for obvious reasons. We need to prioritize mental health resources for those who need it. We are a very reactive country though. Often ways of preventing this violence are not highlighted until tragedy strikes, and then we go back to the same behaviors that led to this happening. It is a vicious cycle that will not happen until we as Americans prioritize our safety over political affiliation.